boot camps. Just like the military has boot camps, coding itself has boot camps as well. And basically what a boot camp is it takes you from ground zero all the way up to creating your own application. And boot camps such as DevMountain, the one sponsoring this video, offer a totally immersive experience. They offer one-on-one mentoring. There's a whole culture to DevMountain that's going to allow you to learn and gain the most experience while you're there. And then once you're out of DevMountain, that's not where it stops. They also help you start your career. So they'll help you optimize your resume, they'll give you career and interview prep, and then you'll get lifetime access to a thing called Meet and Hire, which will basically get you connected with those employers. They offer web and iOS, and they offer many different ways to join their network, such as immersive, part-time, or if you want to do it online, you can do it that way as well. But as for immersive and part-time, they have different locations in Utah, Texas, and Arizona. If you're interested in DevMountain, I'll leave a link for them in the description down below. DevMountain actually invited me to go November 3rd to the 11th to vlog the whole experience at the bootcamp as well. So if you want to get a general understanding of what we learned, my full opinion on what it is and how it is laid out, that will be next week. But anyway, thanks to DevMountain for sponsoring this video, and let's just jump right into it. Hey, what's up guys, Jared here, and today we're going to be working on creating a drop-down menu, kind of like the one you're seeing right now. And by kind of, that exact one. But anyway, creating a drop-down menu inside of Xcode isn't as easy as you think. There's no pre-built thing that you can just implement in there. You have to build it all from scratch, and that is exactly what we're going to be doing today. So yes, this isn't a framework video, there's no CocoaPods, we're going to build this all from scratch. So without any further ado, let's jump right into it. Alright, so the first thing you're going to do is open up Xcode, create a new Xcode project, and inside of here you're going to create a single view application. For your product name, call this whatever you want. Good. Language Swift, and we don't have to set devices anymore because of Xcode 9. Yes! Anyway, add your organization if you want to add that, but now go ahead, click Next, and Create. Now inside of here, you're just going to go ahead, head over here to your viewcontroller.swift, and we're going to do everything in here. Now another thing I've been doing recently is programming everything from scratch. That's right, we don't use the storyboard anymore. So this is going to make the whole process a little bit more confusing for beginners, but overall it's going to make it easier in the long run. So this is going to be a little bit of a crash course for programming without the storyboard if you haven't done it before. So first off, we're going to go ahead and we're going to create another class of a button. And this button, I'm going to go ahead and call this my drop-down button. So we're going to say class, and then just go ahead, hit enter. This is going to be my drop down button, the superclass of a UI button, and then boom, inside of here you're just going to go ahead and say init with the frame, and then we're just going to say super.init with the frame, and then we're going to enter the frame that's inside of our init here. Hopefully that all makes sense, but basically when you create this button now, you're going to say dropdownbutton.init, and then you're going to provide it with the frame, or basically all the measurements that are used for the button. So the X, Y, width, and height. I don't know what I just did with my fingers there. And then it's always going to ask you this, so required initializer init coder. Just go ahead and fix that. Should add that right in there, that it's just a coder, and then it's going to print this out if you get a fatal error. But inside of our frame here, this is where we're going to set up our button in terms of the drop-down menu. So we'll get back to this in a little bit. But first off, let's just go ahead and set this button up inside of our view controller. So it's pretty simple. You just go ahead and say, let my button equal, and then this is going to be my drop down button, open close parentheses. And then down here inside of your view did load, you're just going to go ahead and say button will be equal to my drop down button dot init with the frame, and then you're just going to go ahead and say cg rect open parentheses, and then pick X, Y, width, height. So our X value here, I'm going to set this to 0, Y, width, height, all of that just to 0 at the moment. This will make sense in just a second. And for some reason I set this as a let constant, so that needs to be var button will be equal to the drop down button. Then you're good to go. Now down here, I'm going to go ahead and set up the constraints. So I'm going to go ahead and say button.translates auto resizing mask into constraints will be equal to false. And then we're going to go ahead and say self.view.add subview, and then we're going to add this button right in there. Now that adds the button into our view, and now we just need to position it properly and give it the correct width and height. So this is pretty easy. You're just going to go ahead and say button.centerXanchor.constraint, and then you're going to set this equal to my self.view.centerXanchor, and then after this you're going to say .isActive will be equal to true, like so. Then I'm just going to go ahead and copy this, and then we're just going to set this for our Y anchor as well, So instead of our center X anchor, just go center Y anchor and you should be good to go. Then for our width and height of our button, you're just going to say button.width anchor dot constraint, and then you're going to set this equal to a constant value, whatever you want. I'm going to go ahead and set mine to 150, and then we're also going to have a button.height anchor dot constraint, and we're going to set this equal to 40, whatever you want again. And then of course you need to say dot is active will be equal to true, and so on down here. So there we have it, and we now have a button. Now let's go down here into our drop-down button. I'm going to go ahead and give this self.background color will be equal to a UI color dot, and I'm going to give this the dark gray color. So basically what we just did here to recap is we have the button translates auto resizing mask into constraints. We set that equal to false because what that does is messes up all these other constraints down here. If we don't do that, then these constraints that we set down here just don't work. That's the simple fact about it all. Then down here, we just go through, we set the constraints, and you can think of this as the center X anchor is just going to center it on the X-axis, whereas the Y anchor is going to center it on the Y-axis. And then for your width and height, that's just going to, of course, give it the width and height that you want it to be. So that is that summed up. And then we're just giving this a background color here of the dark gray just to have it contrasty between the white background of our view inside of our view controller. Then I also want to go up here, and this is just for personal sake, I'm going to go ahead and say button.setTitle, and then we're going to set the title to colors because I want this to be a drop-down menu where you select a color. Then for the control state, you're just going to put this as normal. All right, so now we have our drop-down button all set up. Now we need to go ahead and get that drop-down view set up as well. So I'm going to add a bunch of spaces, and then we're going to create another class down here that I'm going to call my drop-down view. Now for the superclass here, I'm just going to go ahead and set this to a UI view. And then we're also going to have this as a UI table view delegate, and also a UI table view data source. Now you might be wondering why I chose a UI view versus a UI table view, and honestly it's just personal preference. You can do whatever you want, but if I have a UI view, one of the things that I like about it is if I wanted to, say, sort the countries in a different way, then I can add those and still have the table view inside of that view, and so that's just one benefit of things. But honestly, you could do whatever. So I'm going to go ahead and continue on, and now we're going to go ahead and fill this table view up with some things. So in order to do that, we need to go ahead and say number of sections, and then we're going to return the number of sections as 1. Then we're going to have number of rows in section, and we're going to go ahead and return, but we first need to create a variable up here called my drop-down options. Why not? And then we're going to set this equal to an array of strings, like so. So what this is going to do is when we want to create this drop-down button here and we want to fill this table view up with certain options, we're going to just plunk all the options into this one variable, and that's going to fill the table view accordingly. Then going back to our number of rows in section, we can just say drop-down options dot count. So that's going to be how many rows are inside of my table view. Now finally, one last function we need to add is cell for row at index path. So with this cell for row at index path here, this is going to be what kind of cell we're populating into our table view, and then we're also going to set the title of that cell. We're just going to be using the basic one in this case, but if you wanted to use your own custom cells, you could do that as well. But I'm going to go ahead and say var cell will be equal to a UI table view cell, open close parentheses, and then down here you're just going to go ahead and return that cell. Properly position all that, and I think we're good to go. So now that we have the cell, I'm just going to quickly populate the cell with the option that we want to add. So this is going to be cell.text label will be equal to, and I'm going to set this equal to my drop down options, open close parentheses, in the which we're going to go ahead and put in the index path.row. And of course, this is cell.textlabel.text. And then we're setting that equal to whatever text inside of our options here. So basically, we're just populating the cell so that it's visible to the user. So now that we have our table view all set up, I'm going to go ahead and go down here and we're going to say init with the frame, just as we did before with our drop-down button. Now we're just going to do it with the drop-down view. And then down here, I'm just going to go ahead and say super.init, and then of course we're going to put in the frame just like we've done in the past. And then we need to add this required init with the coder. So now all this table view stuff that we've created is completely working, but we haven't attached it to a table view just yet. So we need to go ahead and do that by saying var table view will be equal to a UI table view, open close parentheses. Then inside of here, inside of my frame, I'm just going to go ahead and say self.add subview, in which we're going to add our table view. Then up here, I'm also going to say table view.delegate will be equal to self, and then table view.data source will be equal to self as well. Now, we will be the managers of all the data going through. This view will be the manager of all the data going through, and that'll allow it so all these functions are called and executed properly. Now with this table view, we'll want to go ahead and add some anchors to it as well. So I'm going to say table view dot left anchor dot constraint, in which we're going to go ahead and set this equal to the NS layout anchor of my self dot left anchor. And then of course we need to say .isActive will be equal to true. And then now we just need to go ahead and do that with all the other anchors to be our top, right, bottom. That's it. So there we have it. We have all the anchors set up with our left, right, top, and bottom anchor from our table view to the view that's surrounding it. So now that we have that added, we also need to go up here, and I forgot to say table view.translates auto resizing mask into constraints, and we're going to go ahead and set that equal to false. So there is our table view all set up. Now another thing I want to add real quick is the did select row at index path. We're not going to do anything with this just yet. We can print out, I guess, the drop-down options that are coming through here, like so. We can print out the drop-down options that are coming through. But for now, I want to just make sure that function will be called, because in the future, we're going to make that function call back to our original view, and we're going to do something with that. So now, with all that added, we're going to go ahead and add this drop-down view to our drop-down button when it's pressed. It's pretty easy. All you really need to do is say let my drop view equal my drop-down view, like so, open close parentheses. And then with our drop view here, now we just need to set this up inside of our init frame here. All you need to do is say my drop view will be equal to a drop down view dot init with the frame, and then you're going to say cgrect dot init, in which this is going to be 0, 0, 0, 0 as we've done it in the past. And then we're just going to set the constraints as this comes through. And then with this drop view, we also want to say drop view dot translates auto resizing mask into constraints, and we'll set that equal to false. Now finally, we're going to add this onto our view. And you might be saying self dot add subview, in which you're just going to add the drop view, but no, that is incorrect. Because what we want to do is access our parent view, because if you added this just to the button, it'd be cut off and it wouldn't be right. So if you want to do this properly, you just go ahead and say self.superview.add subview, in which we're going to go ahead and add the subview of our drop view like so. Now if you want to, you can also say self.superview bring subview to front, and then this is going to be our drop view. Or if you want to put it behind the button, you can do that as well, depending on how you want your drop view to come down. So now that we have that drop view added, we're just going to add some constraints. So there are going to be 3 constraints that are just going to be constant no matter what. The top constraint, and the center X constraint, as well as the width constraint. So let's go ahead and add those, and then we'll talk about the 4th constraint that we need to add in just a minute. So I'm going to go ahead and set up my top first. So drop view.topAnchor.constraint. Now for your top anchor here, you can do it 2 ways. You can either have it covering the button, so that would spawn it from the self.topAnchor here, and the self is referencing our button, just so you know. Or if you want it spawning from beneath the button, then you would just say self.bottomAnchor. And let's do the bottom anchor for now, just so that we can see everything that's going on. But we'll do that for now. And then you're just going to say .isActive will be equal to true. Then down here, I'm going to go ahead and say dropView.centerXAnchor.constraint. And then we're going to set this equal to my self.centerXAnchor. And then we're going to say .isActive will be equal to true. Then finally, we're going to add the width anchor. So I'm going to say dropView.widthAnchor.constraint, and then we're going to say it's equal to, not equal to constant. We want it to be equal to the ns layout anchor of my self.width anchor. And then of course this is going to be isActive will be set to true. So now that we have those three out of the way, let's go ahead and turn our attention to the height. So in order to do the height, we want to edit the height later on. So we can't just add the height here. We want to add the height up here so that we can edit it later on. So I'm going to go ahead and say var height will be equal to my ns layout constraint down here, open close parentheses. Then down here inside of your init.frame, you're just going to set that height. So I'm going to say height will be equal to my drop view dot height anchor dot constraint. And then we're going to set this equal to a constant variable in which this is going to first be 0. And then with this one, you're just going to leave off the isActive will be equal to true because we don't want to activate it just yet. So now we want to go ahead and activate that constraint and make it adjust accordingly. So this is pretty easy. You're just going to go ahead and say touches began. Because this is a button, you're going to have it happen on an event. So inside of our touches began, there's really only one variable we need to add into this. So I'm going to say var is open, and then we're going to set this equal to false. So this is open here is going to let us know whether or not the drop-down menu is already open or not. So inside of my touches began, I just want to go ahead and say if is open is equal to false, then we're going to go ahead and open it. Otherwise, we're going to go ahead and close it. Now, before we continue any further, let's just go ahead and build and run this, and let's just make sure that our button is set up properly. All right, so we did have an anchoring issue. So we have unable to activate constraint with anchors. This is going to be my drop-down view and the drop-down button. Now, it looks like we actually did get this error between our top and bottom constraints inside of here. So these constraints that we just set up, we're getting some errors with those. The reason we're getting them is because our button was actually created or was called before the SubView was able to load. So it's actually fairly simple to solve this. All you would do is take these lines of code that we have right here, and then we're going to add this into the did move to SubView function here. So we still got the error, but the thing that fixed it for me is going ahead and copying and pasting these values into the did move to SubView instead of the init with frame. And then now if you built and ran this, it's going to load those, load our button up properly inside of the view itself. So there you have it. There is our button. Now, of course, when you click on it, nothing happens yet. Let's make something happen. So what we're going to do is go ahead and activate that height constraint and change the constant. So basically what that means is I'm going to go ahead and say ns layout constraint dot activate, in which it's asking for a few constraints, but we only want to activate our height constraint. So I'm going to go ahead and say self dot height, like so. And then that's going to go ahead and activate that. Now, actually, before we call this, we want to make sure that it has been deactivated, and then we also want to change that constant variable. The reason we do that is, one, if you activate it and it's already been activated, it's just going to go ahead and crash your system. So you want to make sure that it's deactivated for sure. So we're just going to go ahead and do the exact same thing, ns layout constraint dot deactivate, in which we're going to go ahead and deactivate the self dot height. And then to change our constant in between these two, I'm going to say self dot height dot constant will be equal to, and let's set this equal to 150. Now we're going to mess with our constant variable in a little bit, but for now that should be good enough. Now, to animate that opening and closing, all you really need to do is say UI view dot animate, and then if you want to add a bounce or whatnot, if you want to add a bounce, let's just go ahead and do that because it's fun. But go ahead and say animate with delay, using spring with damping, all of this stuff. With the time duration here, I'm going to set this equal to 0.5. Delay will be equal to 0. Using spring with damping, let's just set this equal to 0.5 as well. The options here, these are going to be the animation options. If you hit period, you'll see curve ease in, out, whatever you want. I'm going to go ahead and say curve ease in, out. Then for your animations here, you're just going to say open close curly brackets, or you just can hit enter. And then for the code, we'll get to that in just a second, but for the completion, I'm going to go ahead and set that equal to nil. Then also one thing I forgot to add is if it is open and we press that, then we want to go ahead and say is open will be equal to true now. And then for the else statement here, I'm going to say is open will be equal to false. Now anyway, going back to our animation, all we really need to say is self.dropView.layout if needed. And what that's going to do is now that these constraints have been activated, it's just going to go ahead and apply that and animate that. If you didn't have that, it would just pop, and you can add that of course as well. But you're just going to say layout if needed, and that's going to go ahead and lay out the views of how you want it to be. Nailed it. But if you say layout if needed, that's going to make it animate, essentially. Now, there is an issue with just calling layout if needed, and let's go ahead and test that out in just a minute. But first, let's just get it to close. So now I'm going to go ahead and copy all this code right here, deactivate, activate, all this stuff. And we're going to place that down here. And then we're going to change our constant variable to 0. And we're going to apply that height and make it animate accordingly. Now, let's go ahead, build and run that, and let's see what we have so far. And then another thing, just before we build and run this, I'm going to go ahead and take my table view cells right here, and I'm going to set their background color equal to the UI color dot dark gray. And I'm also going to do that for just the view and the table view itself up here. So instead of the init with frame, table view dot background color will be equal to the UI color dot dark gray, and self dot background color will be equal to the same. All right, so here we are. Let's go ahead and click that, and boom, we have our drop-down menu. Now, obviously, this is not how we pictured the drop-down menu to look. If this is what you wanted, I mean, sweet, there you go. But it's popping from this center position here, because this is the top anchor, and therefore it should just maintain that top anchor, and it's trying to do its best to do that. But what we really want, of course, is for it to animate from the top anchor down, whereas it's going from the center and animating like that, which is incorrect, but it's doing what it's supposed to do, so that's good. So this is actually super simple. All you would need to do is say self.dropView.center.y plus equals, and just so you know, if you add to the y, that makes it go down, because you start at 0, 0 on the top left of the screen, and you go up as you're moving down. Just to clarify that. So it's plus equals, and that'll move it down. If you want to move back up, you go minus equals. So we're going to say plus equals myself.dropView.frame.height, and then just divide that by 2. So that takes the height, divides it by 2, and that's where we're going to be moving up by. And then, of course, something you should know is this function right here, of course, where we're moving down, is called after the layout if needed. Because what that does is it takes the height of the new constant that we just added. Now we're going to go ahead and make it move back up. So this is pretty simple. You're just going to go ahead and copy this stuff here, and just switch it out for a minus equals. It's that easy. But something I do want to clarify here is this function here should really be called before this layout if needed. Because what this is doing is we grab the height and we want to minus it by the height. Now, if we call this after the layout if needed, then the height is going to be equal to 0 because we just set the height to 0. So now, when you click on the button, boom, we've got this cool little drop-down menu going on. It's so beautiful! Ah, that's just so beautiful. I love that. And also, you can click it as fast as possible, and it's going to just put it up and down as fast as possible as well. You're not going to get any errors. So now that we have that animation all working, let's go ahead and populate this table view. Now this is actually fairly simple. All you're going to do is up here inside of your view did load, or if you want to call it from your drop-down button, you can do that as well. But generally, you're going to call it from your view controller. But what you're going to do up here is say button.dropView. And then we have the drop-down options here. And then I'm going to go ahead and set that equal to let's just say hello world right now. Let's see what happens when we have two options. How will that look? All right, so now when we click on that, we have hello and world. Now something that annoys me, and it might annoy you, is if you click on it, you'll see that we have this blank space down here. And I don't like that blank space, baby. So we're just gonna go ahead and eliminate that blank space. So we set that height over here inside of my touches began and my drop down button. So what we need to do is for our self.height.constant variable right here, we set it to 150. And also I want to have some sort of threshold. Like this isn't gonna be all the way down the screen. So we're gonna create a threshold so this is the largest it can get, but also if there is a smaller way to do things, then we're gonna go ahead and go that route. So we're gonna go back over here, and the way that we do that is we say if my self.dropView.tableview.content-size.height, I know it's a lot of dots, but you're just gonna say is greater than 150, then we're gonna go ahead and switch say the self.height will be equal to the constant of 150. Otherwise, if it's smaller than 150, then we're going to say our self.height self.constant will be equal to, and then we're going to go ahead and do all those dots again. So self.dropView.tableview.content-size.height. And then that is going to be the height of our constant now. Now go ahead and build and run that, and we should eliminate that blank space. So let's go ahead and click on that, and boom, cuts off. Now something else that's happening is with our colors here, you'll see that when we click on these cells, nothing is currently happening. What I want to do is two things. We want to pass along some data. I'm actually going to go ahead and set the title of this this initial button here to whatever we click. But also, I just want to go ahead and close that drop view as well. So this is all fairly simple. All we need to do is add a protocol. Now we can dive deep into protocols another day, but basically it's like creating your own custom delegate. So any functions that you put inside of your protocol, those will be called and delegated by whatever view is the parent view. Let's go ahead and put this into practice, and it'll hopefully make a lot more sense than how I'm phrasing it. But we're going to go ahead and say protocol, in which we're going to say this is my drop-down protocol, I guess. Now for our requirements here, I just want to require one function in which this is going to be my drop-down pressed function, I guess. And then along inside of this, I want to pass along a string variable. So I'm just going to say func drop down pressed open parentheses string colon capitalized string, and there you have it. That is now your protocol. And now let's go down here to our drop down button, and all we're going to do is say comma drop down protocol, like so. And then what this is going to do is give you this error and ask you to add those functions. So now with this function here, this is passing along some data, and we'll go through what that data is in just a second. But that string now is going to be the table view object that you click on, so either hello or world. So now if we head back here, I'm going to go ahead and say self.set title, and I'm going to set the title to the string that's passed along. And then this is of course lowercase string, we don't want the uppercase string. And then for the control state, I'm going to put this as normal. So that's just setting the title there. But the magic part of protocols is now let's head down here to our drop-down view. And all we need to do down here is say var delegate colon, and then this is going to be equal to my drop-down protocol exclamation mark. So now we have created a delegate for our drop-down view. And then another thing that goes along with this is we need to set this delegate. So this is pretty simple. You just go up here and where you create your drop view. So this is going to be up here inside of my drop-down button. I'm going to say drop view dot delegate will be equal to self, because what we did up here is give the drop-down protocol over to our drop-down button, and therefore this delegate can now be called, and then this data that's coming from the delegate will be passed along to this function here. So now let's go down here to our drop-down view, and where we say did select row at index path, where we had print. It was printing, by the way. All of that is printing down here. That's why you have a bunch of hello worlds down there. But as those are printing, I actually just want to pass along that data. So I'm going to say self.delegate.dropdownPressed, in which we're going to go ahead and pass along the string that we were printing out before. So now that's going to go ahead and call the delegate and pass along the data that we are needing, the string value. And then that's going to be called up here, where we set the title or do whatever the heck we want with that value. Now another thing I wanted to do is we currently have hello world being our options, but I was initially having this as colors, so I'm going to fulfill that, and let's go ahead and add these as the colors. So now I'm also adding all these variables to show that we do have that threshold in fact. So now let's go ahead and build and run this, and let's see what we have. So now I have my color button here. Click on that. When we click green, it sets the title of the button to green, and so forth with black, white, all of this stuff. It works. Now another thing I wanted to do is close that drop view when I do select one. That's just a personal preference of mine, but you can do whatever you want. So to do that, I'm going to go down here to my drop down button, and we're going to create another function that's going to say dismiss drop down. So that's just going to dismiss the drop down view like so. Then let's go up here inside of my touches began, and down here I have deactivate and all that. I'm going to go ahead and copy all that. And also we want this is open equal to false as well. So we're going to add that in there as well. So we're setting our is open to false, and then we're just going to close it up like so. Now where do I want to call this function? Just up here inside of my drop down pressed. And I'm going to say self.dismiss drop down. Now let's go ahead, build and run that. And when we click on a table view cell, it's going to go ahead and close up that drop-down menu. So now when we click on colors, click green, and boom, it just closes right back up. And so far with pink and black and everything. Sweet. Now this is just a little add-on that's kind of been annoying me, is with this did select row at index path, it stays selected. I just don't like that, so I'm going to say self.tableview.deselect row at index path. I'm going to go ahead and put in my index path with the animated. We'll set this equal to true. Now let's go ahead, build and run that. And now we shouldn't have, like when we click on one of these, they shouldn't stay selected as they were having before. Now I clicked on green, and now green is just deselected right after. So there you have it. Now something else I just wanted to note super quick is if I change the width of my button real quick, if I set that to 100, that'll automatically change the drop view. So that was one of the beauties of setting the width to the width of the button. That way it just fits whatever size button you want to use. Again, I'll leave this in a GitHub in the description down below. So there you have it. Now the button has changed sizes, and so has the drop view as well. Now, of course, there's a few add-ons. The design looks terrible at the moment, but for now you get the gist of how this whole thing works. Something I'll note is corner radius isn't the easiest thing to do on here. If you just say self.layer.cornerRadius, it'll work perfectly, but if you have just too specific corner radius, or if you add a shadow or other stuff like that, the animation doesn't animate sometimes, or at least that was happening to me. Maybe I'm doing something wrong. Possible. But if you were to do that, you would probably want to look into CA basic animation for messing with that kind of stuff. But for now, that's a little bit too much for this tutorial. Anyway, that's enough talking from me. Thank you guys so much for watching. I haven't said thank you for 50,000 subscribers yet. Thank you. That's an honor. It's an honor to be where I am today, and I thank you guys for that. Anyway, thank you all so much for watching. Have an awesome day. Keep coding, and I will see you in the next one. Peace.